Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I was 43 the year the late notices started arriving in red ink. That color is designed to do a particular kind of work on a person. It makes your heart try to sprint in a room with no air. Our son, Evan, was 14, a good kid who left his shoes anywhere the earth decided to be flat and could never find a pen unless it was already in my hand. My wife, Lisa, was 37 and had always been the practical dreamer between us, the one who organized the school bake sale with a spreadsheet and still believed we would take that road trip to the national parks as soon as things calmed down. Things didn't calm down. They never do on their own. When the layoffs came through, they didn't care how long you'd been warming the seat or how many times you'd eaten your pride at meetings. Lisa had given 7 years to that marketing firm, late nights, weekends, the kind of smiling that hurts your face. The new VP brought in his people, and suddenly my wife's position was redundant. It's a word that sounds like a spreadsheet shrugging. "We'll be okay," I said, because that's what husbands say even when they're reading the same numbers. "I can pick up extra shifts." I worked third shift at a regional distribution center off I-94, where the trucks pull in like tired whales and the forklifts beep their way through the night. I'd done delivery before, odd jobs. The thing about night work is that it keeps your body in a different time zone than the rest of your life. You learn to nap like a cat, to accept that the sun can be the worst coworker you've ever had. Lisa took the first month like a punch she could walk off. She reorganized the pantry, she painted the bathroom a color called sea glass that looked like hope if you squinted. She made lists, jobs to apply for, people to call, certificates to complete. We ate together every day at 4 p.m. Like some family on a cruise ship schedule, because I had to leave by 5:15 to make my shift. Evan would do homework at the table while Lisa wiped down counters that didn't need wiping. "I'll land on my feet," she said, and tapped the heel of her hand against the counter like it was a trampoline. I believed her because I'd always believed her. Lisa had an energy that felt like a solution walking around in a person's body. 2 months in, she started going to networking coffee meetups at a co-working space with polished concrete and a chalk menu. "So many people are pivoting right now," she said, using a word that sounded agile and non-desperate. She brought home glossy brochures with smiling couples in linen. "It's a lifestyle brand," she told me, "not exactly MLM, more like a community. They do wellness products, retreats, financial coaching." I nodded in that husband way that means I am trying to keep my eyebrows from saying something unhelpful. "They're really supportive," she added, which I knew meant they were telling her a story she needed to hear. The support group met on Tuesdays and Thursdays and then Saturdays. There were pop-up parties and content strategy sessions, phrases that made our practical life feel like it was happening in a place with mood lighting. Lisa started staying out later. She'd come home with a glow that wasn't entirely about accomplishment. "We're building something," she said, placing a box of supplements on the counter like bread for the table. I read the label with its promises of clarity and energy and silently did the math. This month's light bill, that surprise car repair, Evan's cross-country shoes. Evan watched us like kids do when the ground under the house starts to shift but nobody has the courage to pull up the floorboards. He'd ask, "Mom, will you be home after practice?" And Lisa would say, "Text me your location, honey," and then kiss him on the head. I started keeping a second phone charger in my truck because mine kept dying from midnight calls that were mostly silent breathing. By fall, the group had grown, or my awareness of it had. There were names I heard often: Maya, who drove a Tesla on credit, Curtis, who posted motivational quotes about wolves, a man named Shane whose Instagram was all watches and abs. They had a way of talking about money like it was a moral quality. "It's just mindset," Lisa said one night, leaning against the counter, her eyes bright in a way that made me nervous. "You've got to stop thinking you're a victim of your circumstances." I looked at my hands, the scrapes and forklift calluses, and wondered for a second if I'd been living wrong this whole time without the benefit of a ring light to tell me. I don't know exactly when the pills started. They were probably already in the picture: biohacking, sleep stacks, focus things you can buy at stores or on the internet without ever meeting the person who made them in a lab. A friend of hers from the group popped over one afternoon with a new bottle and said, "These are legit. Totally safe. Doctors use them," and I did the math on the word doctor doing a lot of work in a sentence. Lisa slept less. Or she slept in the mornings and jittered in the evenings. She skipped meals and then binged on caramel popcorn at midnight. We were two satellites in separate orbits, waving occasionally as we passed. One Tuesday, Evan had a cross-country meet, and Lisa didn't make it. She texted me at 7:13, "Running late, be there soon," and then nothing. I held my phone like a votive candle and watched our son finish eighth, his face flushed and radiant, turning toward the crowd to look for a shape he didn't find. "She'll see the video," I said, and filmed him anyway, his stride clean, the banner whipping in the wind, the coach clapping a rhythm that always sounds like hope. We fought that night. Not with plates and words that stain, fought like tired people with polite voices that are really knives. "I can't be everywhere," Lisa said, sitting on the edge of the bed, her shoulders drawn like a curtain. "Neither can I," said. "But I am at work, and then I am at home, and then I am at work. I'm not at wherever you have to be at 2 a.m. She pressed her fingers into her temples. "You don't understand," she whispered, and I wanted to say, "Help me, then. Help me understand." Instead, I said, "Evan ran great," which was less a change of subject than a lifeline I hoped we'd both grab. She nodded without looking at me. "That's good," she said, and I lay down trying to remember if this was how endings began or if we were just going through a longer, rougher middle. The night Evan called, it was raining hard enough that the wipers couldn't keep up. I was on my lunch break at the depot, sitting in my truck with a ham sandwich and a thermos that tastes like coffee and metal no matter how much I scrub it. The screen said, "Evan," and my father's body answered before my brain did. His voice was small but steady. "Dad," he said, "Mom didn't come home last night." I reached for the clock in my head. "You said she had the late thing," I said, stupidly. "That was 2 nights ago," he said, and now the sandwich sat on the dashboard useless as a prop. "Did you call her?" I asked. "Yeah. It goes to voicemail," he said. "I called Grandma. She came over. She said to call you." There's a particular kind of fear that tries to climb up your spine and strangle your rational mind. I have seen it on the faces of people at car accidents and kitchen fires. It's the fear that knows the difference between bad and irreversible. "Okay," I said, hearing my own voice calm down like it was obeying a training manual. "Where are you now?" "Home," he said. "Grandma's here." "Good," I said. "Stay. I'm coming." I drove to the house on tires that threatened to hydroplane and tried to keep the part of my brain that writes endings away from the wheel. At home, Evan stood in the doorway like a scale model of me, his hair damp and defiant. My mother-in-law, Carol, held a mug like an anchor. "She texted me yesterday," Carol said, after hugging me with her whole small body. "Said she was fine and would be home by dinner." She looked at me over the rim of the mug, and I knew we were beyond the stage where fine means anything except please don't ask me questions I can afford to answer. I called Lisa. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Where are you? We're worried. Please answer." I tried the numbers of the friends I knew. Maya answered on the third ring with a chirp that sounded like she was in a car with the music too loud. "She's with Shane," she said, and then, "I think," and then, "I'm sure she's okay," in a tone that made me want to throw my phone into the sink. Shane didn't answer his phone. His Instagram did, in that it showed me he'd posted a video at midnight with a caption about grinding when others sleep. The worst part of a platform where people broadcast their lives is the way it makes you think you have information when you only have noise. I started calling hospitals. That's the move nobody wants to make because it turns a worry into a file. The receptionist at County put me on hold for 8 minutes that felt like a decade while a recorded voice told me my call was important. "No Lisa." The urgent care 2 towns over had a Lisa 15 minutes earlier, wrong age, wrong last name. The woman at Street Mary's was kind in a way that made my throat hurt. "I'll check again in 20, she said. "Please keep me posted." Evan sat on the couch without pretending to look at his phone. "Is she dead?" he asked, because teenagers know how to pierce through fog with a single awful word. "I don't think so," I said, because I didn't. I thought she was in a place where the rugs smell like cigarettes and the ice machine is louder than the TV. I thought she was with people who dull the sharp edges of each other until it's just one long smear. It was Carol who said, Motels. She said it like she was lighting a candle to carry into a dark room. There's that strip by the highway, she added, eyes fixed on the floor. She had grown up in this town. She knew where people go when they don't want to be found. I drove the strip like a cop in a movie without the lights. The first lobby had a plastic ficus and a man watching a game show with the sound off. "Looking for my wife," I said, holding up a photo. He didn't look at the picture. He looked at my face and then at my hands and said, "Try the Meridian," like he was giving me directions to a place to buy bait. The Meridian had lost 2 letters from its sign. The carpet in the hallway had a pattern designed to hide stains not from the cleaning staff but from the mind. I knocked on door 214 because the receptionist said, "We do have a Lisa in 214, sir, but I can't," and then didn't finish because I was already moving. When she opened the door, she wasn't Lisa and then she was. That's the best way I can describe it. She was thinner in the way stress doesn't advertise. Her eyes were both too bright and too far away. She had a sweatshirt of mine on, the one from the Wisconsin Dells with a cartoon moose, and it hung off her like it had lost faith. The room smelled like old smoke, those incense sticks that promise to cover other smells and only end up making more of them, and something medicated, down the middle of your nose and behind your eyes. "Hey," she said, as if I'd walked into the kitchen at noon and not a motel box with the curtains drawn at 3 in the afternoon. There was a crumpled fast food bag on the dresser and a water bottle with the cap off. On the bed, that bed that made me want to burn my shoes, was the shape of a person. Shane. He sat up, bleary in a way that made me hate him for the ease of it. "Bro," he said, and that was all I needed to commit his face to memory as the opposite of whatever word we used to mean decent. "Evan called me," I said, not to Shane but to the air, because saying my son's name made me remember what part of the world I belonged to. Lisa's mouth twitched. "I lost my phone," she said, and for a second something in me wanted to laugh because it was such a small lie to bring into a room that large with consequences. "We need to go," I said. "Now." She looked at the bed like a person looks at a chair her legs have memorized. Then she looked at me. "I don't feel right," she admitted, and that simple sentence with its 2 facts, cut through performance. Her hands were shaking. Shane said, "She just needs to sleep it off," and I said, "Get out," and my voice must have carried some version of the man I'd become when someone stopped breathing, because he went. At County, they took her in without the paperwork because the nurse at triage knows more about humans than most philosophers. They gave her fluids and did labs and spoke to me in acronyms and normal words shaped to sound like acronyms. "Stimulants in the system," someone said. "Dehydration," someone else said. "We're getting social work," the nurse said, and that phrase alone made me feel like a person again because it meant somebody whose job it is to glue families back together had been notified. I sat in the plastic chair by the curtain while Lisa slept the kind of sleep that doesn't deliver rest. The curtain felt both too thin and too much like a wall. A doctor with kind eyebrows came and talked to me about next steps and resources, which is how America talks about fixing what it has allowed to break. He wrote numbers on a pad and underlined them. He said detox and partial hospitalization program and IOP, and I nodded like a student, committing the acronyms to a page in my head where they could fight it out later. He asked if there were substances at home. "Just the internet," I said. He didn't smile. Lisa woke and cried and apologized and then cried without apologizing. I took her hand and put a straw to her mouth like you do for someone who has forgotten the mechanics of it. "Evan's okay," I said. "He's at home with your mom." He was scared. "I'm sorry," she said, and it sounded like she was apologizing to a large circle of people that included the person she used to be. The next month is a montage if I tell it straight: intake appointments, forms, group rooms with chairs in a circle, a woman named Tash who spoke about cravings like weather systems to be navigated rather than monsters to be slain. There were urine cups and visitation hours and a therapist with a voice so calm I thought it might be a trick. Lisa did the work when she was present. She slipped twice that I know of. I learned that improvement is not a line but a forest path with roots and ruts that will wait patiently to trip you. We filed for divorce while she was between programs. That sounds cruel. It felt like not setting the house on fire while trying to fix the electrical. "It's not because I don't love you," I said in the car outside the courthouse. It's because Evan needs one thing in his life that doesn't wobble. She stared at the glove compartment like it might yield a different outcome. I know, she said. I hate it, but I know. She took my hand and then let it go as if it had burned her. The custody hearing was in a courtroom where a flag looked tired of being asked to sanctify everything. Our lawyer had a folder tabbed with bright post-its. Her lawyer had the kind of shoes that don't get scuffed by sadness. The judge was a woman about my mother's age with glasses that made her look like she had seen every version of every bad idea. We'd already agreed on most of the practicalities, but the judge wanted to hear from Evan because he was old enough to have a voice in where he would live. They swear 14-year-olds in with the same oath as adults. The bailiff didn't soften it. Evan stood straight in a borrowed shirt that pulled a little at the shoulders and said I do like he was stepping onto a high diving board. The judge asked him if he wanted to share his thoughts. He looked at Lisa first. That alone almost tore me open, the simple courtesy of my son acknowledging his mother as a person before he said the thing he had to say. "Mom," he said, quietly, "I love you." He swallowed. He had to look down and start again. He looked at the judge. "My dad was there," he said, and then smiled awkwardly like he didn't know the right words for everyday heroism. "When Mom was when everything was happening, he was the one who picked me up and took me to practice and made sure the bills got paid." He started speeding up, the way he does when he talks about a subject he understands. He's always been there, even when he's tired from work and it's like 6 a.m. Because he works nights. He stopped, took a breath. The judge waited. Evan looked back at Lisa, and his voice got smaller. "I want to live with Dad," he said. "I'll see Mom as much as I can. But I want to live with Dad." If there is a sound for a heart breaking without rupture, it is the soft exhale Lisa made then. She nodded. She didn't correct him. She didn't beg. In that moment, I saw the woman I married, the one who would take the hit before she'd let him take it. She wiped her face with both hands and looked at me like we were the only two adults in a boat on a bad river and she was asking me to steer. The judge ruled what we had already arranged. The phrase is primary physical custody, which is a tidy suitcase for a life to travel in. Lisa got weekends when she was stable, holidays arranged by a calendar that made me feel like an accountant of feelings. There were contingencies and tests and check-ins. There were also hugs and parking lots and the miracle of my son never flinching when his mother embraced him, even when he was angry. The months that followed were less dramatic than any story wants them to be. They were early mornings with oatmeal and fruit because teenagers are engines, they were reminders to bring the cleats, they were me falling asleep in the bleachers and jerking awake when the whistle blew. They were Lisa in a church basement with a circle of people who clapped for each other's Tuesdays. They were text messages from her that said, "Day 42, and then, Day 17, and then, later, Day 63, and me learning to respond, "Proud of you," without adding anything that sounded like an invoice. Sometimes Evan would come home from his mom's place quiet in a way that isn't about silence so much as conservation. He'd sit with the cat on his lap and stroke it like he was sanding a piece of wood to smooth it out. I tried not to ask questions that turned into traps. "How was it?" I'd say. "Okay," he'd answer. "We watched that dumb baking show." He'd grin. "She still burns garlic." We'd laugh, and for a second it felt like we were on the same timeline again. I went to Al-Anon because the social worker at county told me to, and I have finally learned that when people who see a lot of pain tell you something, you should try it before you decide you're different. I sat in a circle of folding chairs with other people who had learned to measure their day by someone else's storm. I heard phrases that at first sounded like fridge magnets and later felt like the ground. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, you can't cure it. Detachment with love. One day at a time, made me roll my eyes until a Tuesday came where that was, in fact, the only way to proceed. Evan turned 15 and then 16. He grew into his feet. He drove my truck like a person who had been watching me drive his whole life and taken notes. He learned how to make a simple pasta that didn't weld itself to the pan. He said once, on a Sunday night, "I'm glad you were the one who had to be the grown-up," and then immediately said, "Sorry," as if he'd insulted his mother. "There are lots of grown-ups in this story," I said. "We just take turns being the one who holds the keys." Lisa relapsed once hard. Evan was at her apartment when her voice went too fast and then too slow and he called me without drama. I drove over and we did the drill, the water, the couch, the call to the sponsor whose number was on the fridge. I watched my son put a blanket on his mother's legs and thought, there are kindnesses this boy has learned that I would have never taught him on purpose, and there are strengths he has forged that I hope he never has to use again. Later that night, when it was just us, he said, I hate it, and I said, me too, and we had popcorn and watched a dumb movie because that's what humans do when the alternative is staring at the wall while your thoughts tie knots. I don't know if we are a success story. That implies an ending and a parade, and what we have is a calendar with boxes we put checks in. Lisa has 90 days today. She texts me 90 and a sun emoji. I respond with a thumbs up and then add, proud of you, because sometimes repeating yourself is a form of loyalty. She and Evan went to a matinee yesterday and sent me a picture of them wearing ridiculous 3D glasses, both grimacing like they'd been told to smile by a dentist. It is maybe my favorite picture of them. They look like themselves again, which is to say they look like two people in process, which is all any of us ever are when you strip away the before and after myth the internet loves to sell. I still work nights. The beeping of the forklifts is the same metronome it has always been. At 4 a.m. When the world seems to be taking a breath before making new mistakes, I think of Evan asleep down the hall at home, his window cracked even in winter, the air cold enough to make you believe in things. I think of Lisa, and I don't rehearse speeches anymore. I pray sometimes, which I never used to. Nothing fancy. Please keep him safe, for Evan. Please keep her steady, for Lisa. Please keep me simple, for myself. On Sundays, Evan and I do a big grocery run and pretend like we're a cooking show about dads who don't season enough. We plan meals on an index card stuck to the fridge with a magnet from the Wisconsin Dells, the moose's cartoon eyes forever surprised. Sometimes, when the light hits the kitchen at 5:30 p.m. the way it does only in March, I can imagine the road trip we never took, the one with the tall rocks and the lodges that smell like old wood. Maybe we'll still go, just the two of us, and send Lisa photos of views and coffee mugs from places with names that sound like a promise. The last time we were in court for a check-in, the judge looked at Evan and asked, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm okay," and then glanced at me and at his mom and added, "We're okay," and the judge smiled in that tired way that isn't fake. "That's the best answer I hear," she said. "Keep doing okay." We walked out into the parking lot, and Lisa hugged Evan and then stepped back, slicking her hair behind her ear with a gesture that used to mean she was about to take charge of a meeting. She looked at me. "Thank you," she said. It is the kind of phrase that could be sarcastic or heavy or empty. She meant it like a glass of water. I said, "You're welcome," because there isn't a better reply. On the way home, Evan asked if we could stop for pie at the diner by the highway where the waitresses call everyone honey. We got cherry and lemon meringue and split them down the middle. The pies were too sweet and the coffee was too strong and the check came on a little tray like a prop from a play. "You good?" I asked him. He nodded, sipped his water, considered his fork like it held information. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." He looked out the window at a car that needed a muffler and back at me. "I'm glad you came to get her," he said, apropos of nothing and everything. I put my hand over his on the table. "Me too," I said. "Me too." When we got home, the house smelled like laundry soap because I had left a load in the dryer, and the cat twined around our legs like a man with one story to tell. Evan went to his room and put on some music that always sounds like a dial-up modem to me. I sat at the kitchen table with the mail and a pen and wrote a list: oil change, call the dentist, pick up more oatmeal, remind Evan to register for the SAT, text Lisa 90 again tomorrow. I put the pen down and listened, to the dryer tumbling, to the hum of the fridge, to the ordinary house sounds that are the opposite of a motel air conditioner. I breathed. It felt like drawing breath at the surface after a long, imperfect swim. I am not a man who believes in symbolic victories. But if you asked me to name one, I would say, sometimes the miracle is not a rescue with lights and sirens. Sometimes it is a boy in a borrowed shirt, saying the truth into a microphone, and a mother who doesn't argue with it, and a dad who learns to cook pasta without burning it, and a house with a list on the fridge. We are okay. Today, That is the whole story. Tomorrow, we will write as much of the next page as belongs to us, and no more. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.